And Mike McKee, our international economics and policy correspondent, joining us from Washington. Now let's head to Capitol Hill, where Bloomberg chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli by Congressman Jeb Hensarling for an exclusive interview. Kevin?
David, thank you for that. We're here with House Financial Services Committee Chairman Jeb Hensarling. Busy day in the Senate. What are you hoping to ask Federal Reserve Chairwoman Janet Yellen tomorrow when she testifies in the House?
Well, we need a healthy economy, and what we know is after 8 years of zero interest rates, there is zero evidence that it's working. So what I hope to hear from the chair is that we will have a more predictable monetary policy strategy that all Americans can count on, they can plan on, that will help grow our economy. That's the number one thing I want to hear. One
of the things that we heard from senators at this morning's hearing was about the Financial Choice Act, which you are getting ready to introduce. It would walk back parts of the 2010 Dodd-Frank law. We obtained a memo, Bloomberg reported this, and there was particularly some changes to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. One of the changes is that it would switch it to keep it as a director. What are you hoping to accomplish at the CFPB with your new legislation?
Well, I want to protect consumers from the Orwellian name Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's the most important thing we want to do. It is a rogue agency. It has been ruled unconstitutional. Let me repeat that. It is unconstitutional. So now, in a democracy, one person should not have the ability to determine what credit cards go in our wallet, what checking accounts we can have, or even if we can have a mortgage. So in many respects, this agency is not just involved in law enforcement, which it should be, but it is actually creating law, and it is unaccountable. That has to change. And so we are trying to ensure that, number one, it is constitutional, and that, number two, it actually protects consumers. And the greatest way to protect consumers is to ensure that we have competitive, innovative, vibrant credit markets. And in many respects, CFPB has hurt them.
Mr. Chairman, in the first version of this act that you introduced regarding CFPB, you changed the structure of it to a commission or a board of directors. In the draft memo that was obtained by Bloomberg, what it says is that it would keep it to a directorship. Now, Democrats like that, but I'm curious, where exactly will you change the CFPB's makeup?
Well, I'm always happy to make my Democratic friends happy. So this is something they insisted on. So if it's helpful, then we will go ahead and leave it in the bill. Stay tuned. The new bill hasn't been introduced.
When do we expect that?
Well, I would hope that it would be in a matter of weeks, but I want to make sure it's more important to get it done right than it is to get it done quick. But we know it's a priority of the president and the vice president and the speaker to get it done this year. I hope we will have the next version out in relatively short order. But the most important thing is that we have to have an agency that is accountable, that is actually protecting consumers, making sure that they have their economic choices are respected. Right now under the CFPB, we've seen free checking at banks cut in half. We've seen many banking fees go up. We know that it's more difficult for many working Americans to get a mortgage. We know many auto loans have gone up $500. So we have to have an agency that is actually accountable, that's in the enforcement of business, in this current unconstitutional rogue agency has got to be reformed.
So, Mr. Chairman, you've worked with this White House. You've worked with Vice President Mike Pence. You've worked with now Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, as well as Gary Cohn, on these specific policies. Now, other sources that I speak with on Capitol Hill indicate that the legislation that you are set to introduce is perhaps more conservative than the first version of the bill. You get rid of, in some areas, stress tests, for example, one particular aspect. My question to you is this really feasible to pass in the Senate, which, of course, is not as conservative as the House of Representatives?
Well, I always stand ready to negotiate with myself. So we're going to produce a bill in the House, and then we'll see what the Senate can produce. And then the process is that we go to conference. And so I look forward to going to conference with the United States Senate. But we will always work to make sure that we have a healthy economy for all, bailouts for none. We can't have a healthy economy as long as we have the sheer weight, volume, cost, complexity, and uncertainty of Dodd-Frank, which is just absolutely crushing the animal spirits out of our economy today. That has to change.
And specifically, have you given thought to how and what areas of issues you would negotiate on? Are there specific negotiating issues that you're willing to work with them when it goes to conference?
Well, I don't find it helpful to start taking things off the table, but I know what's most important to the American people, and that is to get out of the bailout business. And unfortunately, Dodd-Frank didn't end bailouts. It enshrined them into law. That has to change. Additionally, we have to, as I said earlier, respect the fundamental economic liberties of the American citizen. And when they're losing free checking, when they're seeing their mortgages go away, when some auto loans are costing $500 more, we've got to work to protect consumers in competitive markets. We also have to work on regulatory relief for our community financial institutions because we're losing one a day, and as we lose them, we lose a very important source of credit to small businesses, the job engine in America.
Chairman Hensarling, one final question. 1 year from now, after all of this is settled, will the CFPB still be around, or will Congress have Congress voted to eliminate this agency?
Well, again, we need an agency to enforce our consumer laws. We need Congress to create the consumer laws. And unfortunately, again, CFPB should not be in the business of creating law. They ought to be in the business of also respecting due process. So we will have an agency, whether or not the name is changed on the door, whether or not Federal Trade Commission enforce our roughly 18 major consumer laws, whether we have our banking regulators do it. We need to have, there's still bad players out there. I mean, witness Wells Fargo. Individuals need to be held accountable, which is one of the reasons in the Financial Choice Act we have some of the strongest penalties for wrongdoing in insider trading that have ever been written on the books. So we need an agency to do this, but this one has harmed consumers more than they have helped them.
House Financial Services Committee Chairman Jeb Hensarling of Texas, we thank you for coming on Bloomberg. David, back to you.
Thanks to you as well. Kevin Cirilli, our